Right now, your body is keeping score. Every hour you spend in a chair, every evening collapsed on a couch, every commute locked inside a car, your body is recording all of it. Looking at this chart, you can see the scale of our modern movement deficit. The average adult in the industrialized world takes fewer than 4,000 steps per day. That is roughly 3 kilometers. Yet this machine was engineered by millions of years of evolution to move across open terrain for hours at a time. For a body built with that kind of endurance capacity, 4,000 steps barely registers. It is biological silence, and that silence has consequences. It does not act as a neutral state of rest. It is an active accumulation of an unseen physical debt, and the bill it is building is larger than most people realize. To quantify that debt, a landmark study published in The Lancet tracked the daily habits and health outcomes of more than 1 million adults across 16 countries. The findings were blunt. Researchers isolated the specific danger for people who sat for more than 8 hours per day and did not engage in moderate physical activity. This risk matrix illustrates exactly what they found. For that group, the risk of death was comparable to smoking and obesity. Not slightly elevated, comparable. Let that settle for a moment. From a mortality standpoint, doing absolutely nothing is roughly as dangerous as actively poisoning your lungs. To understand how inactivity becomes fatal, look at what happens internally during an uninterrupted hour of sitting. It is not a slow process. It starts with an enzyme called lipoprotein lipase, or LPL. In a moving body, LPL is responsible for breaking down fat in your bloodstream. This graph tracks the enzyme when you stop moving. Within 60 minutes of sitting, LPL drops 90%. Without LPL, a chain reaction begins. Triglycerides accumulate, blood thickens, arteries stiffen. By the end of that hour, leg blood flow decreases measurably. The damage of a sedentary lifestyle is not some distant decay. It is a rapid biochemical crash that triggers in the time it takes to watch a single episode of television. Simultaneously, your muscles go electrically quiet. The large muscle groups in your thighs and glutes, the most metabolically active tissues, enter a near-dormant state. Because the muscles are offline, your calorie expenditure falls to roughly 1 calorie per minute, or about 4 kilojoules. Secondary systems begin to fail. Insulin sensitivity drops. Your body's ability to regulate blood sugar falters. Over weeks, months, and years, this daily molecular collapse accumulates. Heart disease, type 2 diabetes, certain cancers, chronic lower back pain, depression, cognitive decline. For hundreds of millions of people around the world, these conditions are not random misfortunes that strike without warning. They are the predictable downstream effects of a biological machine that simply stopped doing what it was designed to do: move. The antidote to this biological collapse is not an expensive drug or a brutal workout program. It is one of the oldest, simplest, most primitive movements the human body can perform: walking. Specifically, walking 10,000 steps every single day. That translates to roughly 7 to 8 kilometers, or about 4.5 to 5 miles. Over the course of this video, we'll track what happens when you commit to that number. We will watch blood vessels transform, follow chemical signals to the brain, track the transformation of your bones and your sleep architecture. But first, look at the number itself: 10,000. It sounds like the output of a carefully designed clinical trial. It did not come from one. The number 10,000 has absolutely zero origin in medical science or human biology. While hitting that target triggers a profound biological repair, the person who chose it worked in an entirely different field. The real origin of 10,000 steps is one of the strangest mysteries in the history of public health. We will come back to it. For now, understand your baseline. Your Paleolithic ancestors didn't sit in chairs 10 hours a day. They are estimated to have walked between 15,000 and 20,000 steps daily. This chart compares those two realities. Your cardiovascular system, your bone density, your metabolic pathways, every piece of biological hardware you carry right now was calibrated for that massive Paleolithic output, not the tiny modern input of 4,000 steps. You are running ancient software in a modern environment, and the mismatch is killing people. But the body adapts quickly. What happens in the first 72 hours of walking 10,000 steps begins in a place most people would never think to look. Deep inside the walls of your blood vessels, a physical transformation is already underway. True physical health requires manually overriding our sedentary environment to activate the body's ancient repair protocols. Welcome to BioState. The moment you take your first step, electrical signals fire through motor neurons in your spinal cord. This triggers your quadriceps, hamstrings, glutes, and calves to contract in a coordinated sequence that biomechanicists categorize as one of the most complex physical events in nature. Within seconds, your heart rate climbs. To meet the new energy demand, your heart increases its output, shifting the volume and velocity of blood moving through your arteries. As that blood moves faster, it creates a mechanical force called shear stress against the endothelial cells that line your vessels. This physical friction acts as a biological trigger. In response to this stress, the endothelial lining releases nitric oxide. This molecule signals the smooth muscles surrounding your vessels to relax, widening the arterial path and causing blood pressure to drop as oxygenated blood reaches your organs and brain more efficiently. This graph tracks NO production during a single walk. Within the first 30 minutes of sustained movement, your nitric oxide levels rise significantly, maintaining the dilated state of your cardiovascular system. If you repeat this 30-minute walk daily, the trend line shifts. Your endothelial lining becomes more efficient at producing NO on demand, and the physical walls of your arteries become more elastic. This mechanical stimulus forces the entire cardiovascular system to physically remodel its own architecture to accommodate the habit of movement. Inside the vastus lateralis, the large skeletal muscle of your thigh, each contraction on day one initiates a sequence of microscopic shifts. As the muscle works, it activates an enzyme called AMPK. This is the body's master energy sensor, which switches on the moment muscle contractions increase cellular energy demand. Once AMPK is active, it triggers an immediate increase in fat oxidation and improves the cell's ability to pull glucose from the bloodstream for fuel. Simultaneously, your cells begin mitochondrial biogenesis. They start building brand new cellular power plants from scratch to increase your capacity to generate ATP, the primary energy currency of your body. You don't need intense exertion to start this construction. A moderate walking pace, one where you can still hold a conversation, is sufficient to keep AMPK active and the new power plants building. By the end of day one, hitting 10,000 steps creates a specific metabolic profile. You have burned between 400 and 500 calories over roughly 90 minutes of movement, resulting in measurably lower blood sugar levels compared to a sedentary day. Within 24 hours, your muscles have sent a metabolic signal strong enough to change how your body processes sugar after a meal. On the second day of consistent walking, the focus shifts to the surface of your muscle cells, where your body begins to change its physical handling of glucose. Specialized proteins called GLUT4 begin migrating to the cell surface in higher concentrations. These act as molecular doors that physically open to allow sugar to move from your blood into your muscles. In a sedentary body, many of these doors stay closed. To compensate, your pancreas must produce extra insulin to force them open, a process that eventually leads to the desensitization known as insulin resistance. By day 2 of walking, these doors open with minimal effort. Glucose enters the muscles more efficiently, reducing the insulin load on your pancreas and increasing your overall insulin sensitivity. This flowchart demonstrates how insulin resistance leads toward type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome. By increasing GLUT4 efficiency, walking creates a biological detour that bypasses these chronic conditions. At the cellular level, the physical opening of these transporter doors halts the progression of insulin resistance, the primary mechanism behind type 2 diabetes. On day 3, the adaptation becomes palpable in your joints. Each step involves a rhythmic compression and decompression of the knee and hip. This physical motion stimulates synovial fluid production. In this joint cross-section, compression mechanically pumps lubricant into the cartilage. Because cartilage lacks an independent blood supply, it relies entirely on this pumping to receive nutrients. Without regular walking, this tissue structurally degrades. By the 72-hour mark, your endocrine system also begins to stabilize. Sustained movement helps regulate cortisol, preventing the chronic elevation of this stress hormone that otherwise disrupts sleep and suppresses your immune function. Continuous walking ensures cortisol remains at functional levels, mitigating the physiological triggers of chronic anxiety. The first wave of transformation is now complete. Your blood vessels are more responsive, your muscles are absorbing sugar efficiently, your joints are lubricated, and your stress hormones have balanced. Beyond this first week, the cellular adaptation moves into its second phase. Between day 7 and day 30, the body begins complex long-term shifts involving the brain's neural pathways and the bacterial ecosystem of your gut. Data from some of the largest studies in modern medicine indicates that the cumulative effect of these systemic cellular changes translates into a measurable increase in human life expectancy. Commit to 10,000 steps a day, and your heart begins to fundamentally change within the first week. These internal shifts are microscopic, yet they are highly measurable. For a sedentary adult, the resting heart rate typically sits between 70 and 80 beats per minute. After 7 days of walking, that rate begins to drop, often by 2 to 4 beats per minute. This visualization shows the heart becoming more efficient. It is remodeling to pump a larger volume of blood with each contraction, doing the same job with less effort. Population studies consistently link a resting heart rate above 80 beats per minute with a higher risk of cardiovascular disease and early death. Every beat your heart does not have to make is a beat that extends its working lifespan. By day 10, systolic blood pressure begins to respond. The top number in your reading may drop by an average of 4 to 6 millimeters of mercury. Across an entire population, a reduction of that size is associated with a 15% decrease in the risk of stroke. These risk reductions are the consistent results of large-scale clinical data. At the 2-week mark, the primary site of change moves from the heart into the temporal lobe of the brain. This is where the hippocampus sits. It is the center for memory, navigation, and emotional regulation. The hippocampus is one of the few structures in the adult human brain that can grow new neurons, a process known as neurogenesis. This growth is fueled by a protein called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF. This protein acts as a fertilizer, strengthening existing synapses while improving mood and learning capacity. Sustained aerobic activity like walking is a reliable way to increase BDNF levels. Inside the hippocampus, you would see dendrites reaching outward and forming new connections with neighboring neurons in response to your footsteps. A study of older adults, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, confirmed this exact physical remodeling. Brain scans showed that while the hippocampus typically shrinks by 1 to 2% every year after age 50, regular walking increased its volume by roughly 2%. Walking reversed the standard trajectory of hippocampal shrinkage, forcing the memory center to physically grow. These benefits also extend down to the gut microbiome, the 38 trillion diverse microorganisms that influence your immune function and your mood. Research at the University of Illinois shows regular walking increases the diversity of these bacterial populations. This activity specifically increases the population of bacteria that produce short-chain fatty acids. These molecules maintain intestinal structural integrity, reduce systemic inflammation, and signal to your immune system. Walking keeps the gut functioning as a high-level biological communication hub. By day 30, the full scope of this whole-body transformation is visible in the data. Your resting heart rate and blood pressure have dropped. Your insulin sensitivity and blood sugar control have improved. Your hippocampus is larger, and your gut microbiome is more diverse. Regular daytime walking also reinforces your circadian rhythm, your internal biological clock, which improves sleep quality and helps regulate your cortisol rhythm. This diagram represents the metabolic shift. 30 days of walking burns up to 15,000 additional calories, or 63,000 kilojoules, beyond a sedentary baseline. That translates to a loss of approximately 2 kilograms of fat, or 4.5 pounds. This profound internal remodeling occurs simply through movement, without changing a single thing about your diet. Most people have no idea how many steps they take on an average day. Check your own count and let us know the number in the comments. Cautionary tone. Before you start tomorrow, understand that there are real risks involved, and some people should approach this goal very differently. The 10,000 step target originated in a mid-century factory rather than a medical research hospital or laboratory. This historical origin changes everything we thought we knew about where this recommendation came from. Walking is widely considered one of the safest physical activities on the planet, but you introduce a severe biological risk the moment you go from 2,000 steps a day to 10,000 overnight. The human body requires time to adapt to new demands because of a simple physiological mismatch. Your tendons, ligaments, and joint surfaces remodel themselves at a significantly slower rate than your muscular tissue. Clinical research indicates that tendons require a specific biological adaptation window, approximately 6 to 8 weeks, to fully adjust to a new level of mechanical loading. When you abruptly multiply your walking volume, your muscles may feel perfectly fine. That absence of soreness is a dangerous illusion, masking the silent overloading of the unprepared connective tissue directly beneath the surface. Push past that adaptation window and the structural costs appear quickly. One of the most frequent overuse injuries is medial tibial stress syndrome, commonly known as shin splints. The tissue along the front of your shin bone becomes painfully inflamed from the sudden, repetitive impact. Plantar fasciitis is another primary consequence. This occurs when the thick band of connective tissue running along the bottom of your foot develops painful inflammation. These outcomes are compounded heavily by what you put on your feet. Walking 7 to 8 kilometers in flat, unsupported shoes on hard concrete effectively multiplies the repetitive stress absorbing into your feet, ankles, and knees. Certain populations need to be especially cautious. Individuals with advanced osteoarthritis, those with cardiac conditions, and people dealing with peripheral neuropathy, a condition where nerve damage reduces protective sensation in the feet, must alter their walking surfaces and seek medical clearance before increasing their daily volume. These common injuries demonstrate how significantly repetitive impact adds up when the volume outpaces your body's ability to repair. Even a low-impact activity requires a structured approach to scaling, making gradual progression a biological requirement rather than a suggestion. So why 10,000? The target printed on millions of modern fitness trackers actually traces back to Japan in 1965, a country riding a massive wave of national fitness enthusiasm following the Tokyo Olympics. To capitalize on this, a precision instrument manufacturer called the Yamasaki Clock Company developed a portable, clip-on device designed to count a person's daily steps. They called it the manpoke. In Japanese, that translates directly to 10,000 steps meter. The company chose 10,000 entirely as a marketing benchmark. It was round, it was aspirational, and it was an easy number to sell. They even had a linguistic advantage. The Japanese character for 10,000 actually resembles a human figure in motion, making the marketing campaign incredibly catchy. At its inception, no clinical trial produced this number. No dose-response study validated it. No peer-reviewed medical journal endorsed it. The universal health benchmark that physicians recommend today was born exclusively from a mid-century instrument company's marketing gimmick. But decades after that little pedometer was invented, researchers finally conducted the massive modern studies required to test the actual relationship between daily step counts and human health outcomes. This chart visualizes a 2022 meta-analysis published in The Lancet, which pooled mortality risk data from nearly 50,000 participants across 15 independent studies. The clinical findings for older adults were clear. For those over 60, mortality risk decreased significantly as steps increased. But the greatest biological benefits peaked at roughly 6,000 to 8,000 steps. For adults under 60, those health benefits extended slightly further. The point of diminishing returns appeared precisely around the 8,000 to 10,000 step mark. A moment of wonder. By pure coincidence, a completely arbitrary marketing decision made in the 1960s landed squarely inside the scientifically validated therapeutic window for human longevity. The modern scientific consensus is that you do not have to hit exactly 10,000 steps every day. 7,000 steps alone yields a 50 to 70% reduction in all-cause mortality when compared to a sedentary lifestyle. To reach that volume safely, you need a biological titration protocol. Start by measuring your current daily baseline for 1 full week without altering your habits at all. From there, add roughly 1,000 to 1,500 additional steps per week. This precise escalation rate gives your connective tissue the time it requires to remodel. Building up in small increments to achieve a consistent volume between 7,000 and 10,000 steps is the most powerful, sustainable investment you can make in your long-term structural health. The timing of that mechanical load matters too. Taking a morning walk helps anchor your body's circadian rhythm, setting your internal clock for the day. Walking after meals triggers a specific physiological response that supports much better blood sugar regulation. And walking outside whenever possible compounds these effects. Natural sunlight exposure adds its own independent layer of biological benefit, driving vitamin D synthesis and active mood regulation. Maintaining this daily volume provides the essential evolutionary signal required to tell the biological machine that it is still in use, still moving, and still alive.